Imagine you're a doctor making $500,000 per year. A recruiter calls you up and says, the pay is lower, the offer is non-negotiable, and you may have to deploy. That's when most people hang up. But today's guest has convinced hundreds of people to say yes without negotiating once. Michael Yalon leads physician recruiting for the US Navy, and he doesn't use cold emails or job boards. He uses LinkedIn. In this episode, we break down how to post on LinkedIn when you know your boss is watching, how to recruit when you can't even negotiate, and why trust beats incentives every time. Let's get into it. Welcome to Connection Accepted. Today we have Michael Yalon on the show. Michael, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.
Michael, for the audience that hasn't met you yet or hasn't followed you on LinkedIn, can you give us a quick background on who you are and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been in the Navy for about coming up on 18 years in July, and I'm originally from South Jersey. If I had to pick a place to call home that I spent, I guess, the majority of my pre-adulthood life, I was an Army brat for a little while, and so I kind of bounced around the country and did a stint at a community college and realized just because you're smart doesn't mean you're prepared for higher education or things of that nature. And so the Navy, I was like, hey, I just want to join one of the service branches, serve for 4 years, get out, go to a big school for free, and then figure it out. And so I was initially going to join the Marine Corps, because that's what you do when you're 18 years old. You think, I want to go run and fight and do the cool guy stuff. Thankfully now, and I appreciate those folks, right? That's a special breed of individuals that we need. But I'm glad that there was nobody in the Marine Corps office when I went to join the Navy that day, or rather when I went to go join the service that day. And in fact, there was only Navy recruiters there. So I was in the what we call the delayed entry program. It's kind of like when you sign up versus like when you actually go to boot camp. It's designed to, mentor and train all the things. So boot camp is not as big of a shell shock or like a culture shock going from like doing your own thing to being told how to do your own thing. So I initially chose to be a gunner's mate. And so for those that don't know what that is, it's, things from being a gunner's mate of working with small arms cruiser weapons like 9mm and M16s and M4s and all that cool stuff to the large and huge missile launchers and like 5-inch cannons that are on the front of, destroyers and cruisers and stuff like that. So launching Tomahawk missiles and all the things you see on CNN is kind of like what gunner's mates and fire controlmen do. And so like after my first 6 years in the Navy, I was going to get out and, do the thing like I'd mentioned, go to school. And I went on recruiting duty, and that's when I drank the Kool-Aid. And so I've been we don't have HR in the enlisted ranks, but we're called career recruiters. And so effectively as of July of like 2014, I've been a career recruiter in the service. That's a 30-second story.
Does everyone in that program that you're doing have to do a rotation in this career services where they try to recruit people, or how did you end up in this role?
There's like a sea and a shore rotation. So like sea is like, deployable and ships and expeditionary units and all the things. And then shore is based where you can go teach, like bringing people coming in to be a gunner's mate. You can go be a drill instructor at boot camp. You can go to recruiting duty as like a fleet sailor and not as a career like recruiter and do a tour there. And there's, a million other things I could go down a rabbit hole about, but basically you have a choice. And the reason why people pick like things like being a boot camp guy or gal, like a drill instructor or on recruiting duty is because it's considered like an arduous duty, more challenging. And so it's more competitive for advancement. So that's why we don't always get the right people. Not that there's such thing as a bad person, but not, as I'm sure you're aware from doing this, it takes like a certain level of confidence and personality to be able to be in that world, even if you're, a good person.
So you're serving in the Navy. You go on this rotation of trying to recruit people in the Navy. What attracted recruitment to you over some of the other work you've done in the Navy before?
That's a great question. If I had to pick one reason, it's just I just love people. It's funny. I'm a huge introvert. If you couldn't tell, like deep down inside, like I feel it in my bones that like the nerves and all the things. But I think over years you kind of like just grow out of it, and no one knows that you're truly an introvert. But I love people and changing lives and networking and like people post all the time. You never know what that next conversation is going to be. It might be your entrance into the guy who's the C-suite person that's your right hand man now for life, or it might be, your best friend that 20 years from now you look back and joke about how you met on LinkedIn or in person. You just never know. And so I just really appreciate like the people business and changing lives and being able to be that middle factor in the trajectory of what's next.
That's very cool because you're essentially giving people that camaraderie and finding someone, hopefully one of their best friends for life, that they're going to be serving in the Navy with. Did most of your friends in the Navy and the people that you've gotten close with, and most people in general, I honestly don't know much about the Navy, and I'm sure the audience probably doesn't as well. Are most people recruited by recruiters like yourself, or do most people just enlist? So maybe give us a breakdown of how most people join the Navy.
There's dozens and dozens of channels, but the big things that folks understand is like obviously recruiting offices. They're out there, right? They're the big elephant in the room. You drive past, you can Google it. And so whether someone in the recruiting office is, on the internet, sending emails, going to the colleges, going to the high schools, that's one avenue. Like me personally, like I walked into a recruiting station. No one called me. I think maybe I had seen someone, do a presentation when I was like a sophomore or junior to like plant that seed. And I thought about it for a while. Honestly, I was like, the Navy's a backup plan. Like only losers join the service. That was honestly just being frank. That was kind of like my perspective of the service. So I was like, yeah, if I strike out or I go to school and I'm not prepared, that's what I'll do. But specifically to answer your question, you know, there's job boards and presentations and referrals and 1-800-NAVY. People ask questions, they get referred over to a recruiter. But if you're going through an enlisted rank, you're going to speak with an enlisted recruiter, and you have to, go to a recruiting station to then get into the Navy, and then on the vice versa. Like if you're going to become an officer, whether you're a neurosurgeon, a lawyer, or, a PhD in, nuclear engineering, similar concept.
So there are pretty much three ways to enter the Navy then. It's more on the place you started, which is almost like the bottom of the rank, the officer, and then more of the specialties like neurosurgeons and other professions like that. Is that kind of how it's divided up?
It's divided up in two, right? So enlisted and officer ranks, and in between there, and it
Okay.
kind of there's like an olive branch down. When you're starting up as an enlisted sailor, usually you come in as like an E1. So the ranks are E1 to E9, and vice versa on the O side. And so basically, unless you are, and there's tons of little niche programs that I don't want to bore you or the audience with, but for example, if you're a dental hygienist, you might be able to come in as an E6, right? Advanced from if you're licensed, but most folks like myself come in as E1 and climb the ranks. Now it's very different on the officer side because it's federal law, it's Title 10, it's federal code effectively, and it's all written differently. Like you must be a U.S. citizen. As an enlisted member, you can be a permanent resident. They have MABD programs for folks that are translators, and so in short, it's either enlisted or officer. And with an officer, you can come in very, very high ranking, as in like, a lieutenant commander or a commander. Like for example, this last week we've interviewed a dozen, very highly skilled specialists within the physical or the position realm.
It sounds just like a company. And when Matt worked at BCG, you pretty much everyone starts at, whether you're 25 or 21 fresh out of college, you're starting at this bottom consultant position. And then you work your way up through that. And then there's some experienced hires where they're on a different track, but there are pretty much two main tracks you can go on in a consulting firm. And I think in most businesses, and it's interesting to learn that the Navy has it too. So when you're recruiting, are you recruiting more on the enlisted side, the officer side, or both?
General or me specifically?
You specifically.
The physician and provider team is like my baby. Like anyone that's a practicing physician or dentist, whether you're fresh out of residency or you're a 55-year-old 10-year doc, that comes through my team. And that's what I do for the entire Navy. Like that's my program.
And are those doctors coming in as officers?
Yes, 100%. Every single one of them are coming in as officers. So just to preface, the Navy covers healthcare and combat medicine, all the things expeditionary for the Navy and the Marine Corps. The Marine Corps as our sister branch, the men's department, as I'd like to say, if I had some of my buddies in the room, but they don't have like a medical branch or detachment, and so the Navy covers the entirety of medical from, routine cleanings to, a combat evac to stabilization to get them back to the States kind of deal. And so within that, we have a medical core for, all physicians and surgeons alike. We have a dental core, same thing, a medical service core, which is like, optometrists and clinical psychologists. And then we have a nurse core, which is everything in the nursing realm. And so it's very deep and it's very densely populated against everything that they have in the civilian sector.
And are you trying to juggle recruiting people from nurses to optometrists across all these buckets for the Navy?
I used to before I was like asked to lead this role, but now we just deal with physicians, surgeons, and dentists, which is equally as challenging. The most challenging, in my personal opinion. They say recruiting is tough. Military recruiting is really tough. Healthcare recruiting is at the next pinnacle, but then combine that with like, hey, you're going to be a service member. You can deploy. Obviously, market compensation is not ever going to be alike, although it's comparable. And so all the other things that make the service unique to what it is, and it's very challenging, but also like very rewarding.
So are the doctors you're trying to recruit getting paid less than they probably would in the industry?
It depends. 90% of the time, yes, only because we have a ceiling. Like we don't negotiate. There's really not a true range, and so there's a ceiling for us based on their rank they would come in as, and how many years they've been practicing. Whereas if you're Dr. Greenberg out in town can knock out, if he wants to knock out 75 RBUs a day or whatever the case is, and you're a dermatologist or whatever, you can make seven figures if you really wanted to, easily. And consult on the side, moonlight, you know. So
Matt and I were just talking about how the way we make a lot of decisions aren't just based on money, because I'm sure the comp is like pretty similar to the industry, right? Or is it not even close? Especially on an hourly rate, because if you're working less but getting paid less, it might even be around the same hourly rate, right?
yeah, so the thing about the service is nothing is based off hourly. Although I break it down in that facet so that way the folks that are used to seeing that can see the comparison, but everything's salary based with us. So like if you're a brand new, family medicine physician or a final year resident that is about to, come into the attendingship world, we're getting out $400,000 bonuses with zero experience aside from residency. And that's really big for like family medicine. I would argue that the specialties that are always going to be undermanned or in high demand rather, like certain surgery fellowships or surgeons, or like right now the big thing is diagnostic radiologists. They can effectively work, wherever they want in their at home and make a huge 500,000 plus salary and have really no overhead or responsibility to report anywhere, and they have a lot of control and autonomy. And so things of that like that within the military mission and like the practice environment that we have, you just don't the opportunity for some of that stuff is not there. But we are comparable to market. We are just not at market.
I see. And I think LinkedIn is definitely a great way to recruit people and give those physicians that emotion and feeling like they're making an impact and show them what a positive experience it's like to be a doctor in the Navy. So I want to transition now to hear how you started posting on LinkedIn, when you like made an account, and how it's progressed with your job.
Yeah. So just like everyone's initial LinkedIn story, it's pretty embarrassing, like most folks. So there's a guy named Michael Quinn, retired sergeant major, pretty solid guy. He runs like a USO program, like where he teaches veterans and service members, like once a month or once a quarter, how to use LinkedIn and questions to ask and informational interviews, etc. And so I was Googling, hey, how do I find people? And I'm always very innovative with everything. Every day I'm trying to find something different, like what's up and coming. And LinkedIn obviously is not up and coming. It's been around for a long time, or so I thought. And so I was like, cool, I'll create a LinkedIn. I went to one of his classes and I was that guy, calling all nurses, emojis and goofiness. And, you could be like, hey, that dude copy and pasted directly from AI. And this was like late 2022, when it like, wasn't even like maybe if you asked 10 people of your buddies, maybe one of them knew what chat was or whatever. I don't even know what chat came out, but there was other like little niche LLMs that were around before chat. But So I was that guy at first. The cool thing, and we can talk about that separately about like LinkedIn Premium. Like, I don't know why people rag on it. I could lead a team without LinkedIn Recruiter and without LinkedIn Sales Navigator, just using LinkedIn Premium with the failing miserably for a year that I did, and like how to really use it from like a recruiting or like a TA or like a sales background. But yeah, so I learned miserably. I would use my 100 personalized connection requests per week, and I would just blast docs and stuff like that, just goofy stuff, and not like from a negative intent, but just like, hey, I think this is going to work because I have the best thing to offer everybody, and they want to listen. And I come to find out that like, hey, this is the only place where you can really, because physicians and dentists, their data is the most expensive besides folks in the cleared space. And so like Doximity and all those places, they're getting beat up every day. Their emails, but one place where they get beat up less, if you will, if that's a thing, is LinkedIn, because it's more of like a public facing, still a social network kind of piece. And so if you're just remotely human, you keep it short, and you have like some content backing whatever sort of message you're going to like try to send them, or it's worked wonders. But yeah, it started off pretty rough. I mean, it was embarrassing, posting jobs and just copying pasting stuff from the VA and making it like my own, or HCA and Kaiser, trying to follow their lead, networking with every physician and provider recruiter I would come across. But I found out that, no offense to them, that everyone is really doing the same thing. And it's just all about numbers and volume. And so I was like, hey, let me not like try to sell something, and just share what the Navy does and what we do and how we're different. And then like passively, man, it's overwhelming. Like, I know everyone probably says like, oh, I get a bunch of messages a day, but I genuinely get like 12 to 18 messages per day. And that's just on like the regular LinkedIn, aside from like LinkedIn Recruiter and Jobs and all the other like platforms that we have open. But LinkedIn is certain the king. I mean, my team would fail, frankly, if we didn't have LinkedIn. So
We need to dive into how you're using LinkedIn Premium, especially because 75% of our audience, Michael, is in the US. And I'm sure some of us have been hit, all of us at some point, by some sort of recruiting message. And it was probably a bland email, a bland piece of maybe physical mail. And what stands out so much about your content is what you just described. Like, you're keeping it short. You're not constantly selling the Navy. And that's how a lot of people are using LinkedIn successfully right now, whether you're in the Navy or a recruiter or not. So can you run us through how you're using LinkedIn to be so successful with it?
yeah, absolutely. So from like a perspective of premium, I don't have a magical like 531 or 1042 or anything of that nature. I'm a huge fan of posting every day. And some people will say that's like madness, but then just spend a couple hours, and automate it. You can go into the scheduling tool, when you have a bunch of great ideas, like you had mentioned on that one podcast, like, I was like, huh, I wonder that other folks are using the Apple Notes to, categorize and just data dump like when the idea is fresh. And so you go in there, you pick 3 to 5 things, you spend some time. Again, I love AI. I hate that people use AI only, but human input, AI output, human refinement. That's like I say that Chris Doe, he's a big influencer. He literally said the exact words, and I was like, dude, that's my thing. And so we had like the same wavelength. But you could have the best message, the best website, and all the things, but like when someone looks at it, like me personally, when someone messages me, I click on their profile, I see what they're about, I go there. It's all about credibility, and if you can't build credibility like in a split second, it doesn't matter what your title is or what company you're backing. Like, I don't care. I want to know that you are a human, and that you have value added data points. And if I'm a physician, or if I'm a whatever the case is, and I go there and it's just god awful like reposts and AI clear, like zero human input. I just personally like don't care to see that kind of stuff or engage with people like that. And I'm sure you see it all the time, um, as well. And there's certain things that come with having premium, and I'm not sure that a lot of people know, because there's a lot of complaints about how it's a waste of money. Even if it's $30 a month, I mean that's like nothing in the grand scheme of cost from a business or even a personal perspective. Like, you can post a free job, have one free job at all times. I mean, if you're recruiting for a certain company, you can post a job through their company on your LinkedIn. If you can't afford to get Navigator or LinkedIn Recruiter to get in-mails, LinkedIn Premium, you get 400 messages per month, 100 per week. and each one of those you get a 300 character message. That is huge. That alone in itself is like worth its weight in gold. And because it's not coming from like a LinkedIn recruiter seat, it's coming from you. And so when they click on you, like it's not going to their separate account, or where you got to open up your recruiter app or open up the recruiter seat inside. It's like it's all you. So it's homegrown. I love the headline thing. I A/B test stuff like I have ADHD, and so I'm every other day I'm like playing around with something. But I love that piece. Bringing the Navy to LinkedIn, where before I was national director, blah blah blah. Doesn't matter. Nobody cares. The next thing. So that's really cool. So the analytics piece, I think, is second to none when it comes to what you're doing, because that kind of shows the background. And even behind that, like I think people should put like I don't have access to share on the screen, but every one of my socials, like when I'm sending out emails, at the very bottom, it's almost gaudy of how large it is, but it says, oh, and by the way, let's connect, and it's in red and blue. And so like if you see the email, you're definitely seeing this. So like even if it was like a half decent email, or it was a badass email, and you're just still like, yeah, I get these all the time, you almost like can't not click that button to see like, hey, let's check this dude's profile out. And so I would argue, whatever you do on the outside of LinkedIn, make sure that it streams them back into LinkedIn, whether it's emails or cold calls or a forward-facing website or whatever it is. But when you're doing all these things, you can pull up the analytics and see like, hey, where's it coming from? Is it coming from the comments? Is it coming from messaging? Is it coming from my post? Am I being searched? Am I not? Who's searching me? What companies do they work at? And you can kind of like every 7 days it resets. And so you can really like take all this data from LinkedIn, which is either free if you're military veteran, military spouse, or for a very low cost, in my opinion, at $30-$40 a month, whatever it is, and to get like, just Herculean data that would cost an arm and a leg elsewhere. Healthcare space is growing so fast right now on LinkedIn. Like some of these other companies are almost giving away some of their data and some of their seats and effectiveness because of how fast LinkedIn is growing. And I have been seeing so fast the growth. I love it. I love it for us at least, and hopefully everyone else takes advantage of it. I could give a PhD dissertation. I could defend this right now in front of Congress. I'm prepared, and like, through all kinds of things, but obviously we're cut on time. And so, is there anything specific you think I should dive into in regards to, any of those things? I'm so passionate about it, man.
Well, us too, Michael. And you touched on so many things that a lot of previous guests have touched on and that we all agree with. Sending connection requests. Like, that has such a higher response rate than email, because we're all checking our connection requests, and it takes more effort to send a connection request than it does in email. You're also updating your profile, updating your headline to make sure you look human. You're checking your analytics to see how you can improve. And you're posting every day regardless of what people say. I mean, I'll try to post 3 times a day, and I haven't had any issues with it. When it comes to diving into one specifically, I mean, we could go on and on forever. Which one do you think has unlocked the most or best results for you so far, or one that you like to spend the most time on, or something we didn't hit on?
That's a great question. It's challenging because you're like, well, these 3 things are super important, but pick one. Man, I would say honestly, it's hard to say because like, if you send a message and there's no substance behind like the who or the you, then nothing means anything. And so I'll say, if you have a good foundation, your profile is optimized, but you have like legitimate content that people can like, if I find someone interesting, I'm scrolling through their profile for 5-10 minutes and I'm clicking on their stuff and I'm like, oh man, this is really cool. And sometimes I write it down. I'm like, I need to try that, or wow, I had no idea. I learned something new today, or wow, I'm going to go sign up for an account for that place because, that's a value added to my life, personally, professionally, or whatever the case is. And so I would argue that just having like a very steady flow of value added content, where if you send someone a message, it instantly will build trust or provide credibility to actually respond and accept. And I think that's huge. The day of like attention and all that stuff, yeah, cool. We can Gary V it up and, you got a split second. But nowadays with AI and, everyone and all the things, trust is my, like, how can I build trust within a split second with someone without them knowing anything about me or trust me, if you will. So, yeah.
When you're writing some of your LinkedIn posts, we're all tempted to just put it into ChatGPT and just copy what that says and paste it out. What is your thought process in workflow really from start to finish when writing your LinkedIn post, all the way from your idea to hitting post?
I would say 25% of the time, I don't use any sort of assistance. And maybe that's a high number. I would say 20% of the time, because just refinement is always needed. And even if it's a robot or a program, you need someone to give you some sort of feedback. And so I would say I started off by myself first. And I have these, you know, however many of them in a document on my phone and in a Excel document as well to show, because I don't have the time to scroll through when you have like hundreds and hundreds of posts. So I think everyone should have an Excel document of like, hey, you know, and you can have like 50 different rows if you want, like the last time I post and, you know, engagement, and just so you can like really have a true sense of your analytics of what worked for your audience. But basically I spill it out to myself first and then I read it as if like, you know, I'm scrolling through a phone and I'm reading it from someone else. And if it sounds goofy or if it doesn't sound like me, or if it sounds like, if when I read it out loud, the message is not coming across the way I want it to, then I'll say, you know, I don't like chat. I use Claude mostly. Or even Gemini is really good now. I don't know why. Something's changed recently within their programming, but I'll say like, hey, you know, this message is coming across too harsh. I want someone to read this and feel like it resonates with X demographic, X range, and I want it to, you know, whatever the specific prompt is to that, you know, to that post, and it'll give me something. And it's never great, but it's much better than what I originally started with. And so then I'll take that and I'm like, great, now I can fix this harsh wording or this filler word, remove the fluff, and provide more value within a more densely populated message. So it's less, and sometimes, you know, especially within my world, you know, there's so much law with it and specific things that I have to have a longer post than I really want. Um, but that's kind of like my workflow. Like I'll really try to pretend as if I can get this through without anybody, and it's just, you know, just my wits.
My favorite part about your process that you described, Michael, that not everyone does, is tracking their posts in Excel. Because most of us will just post a ghost. We won't reply to the comments and we'll just hope everything will work well. And we'll take every week almost like it's week one and we're just posting from scratch. But in reality, the key to success in content really is the format and iterating on what you've done well before. So if there's some specific format of talking about the Navy that's going viral, you should flag that in your Excel and repeat that. And I think a lot of the audience can sometimes get caught up because they're thinking, well, I've posted so many times and I can't come up with any more original ideas, when really the new idea for you is sitting right in front of you. So I'm curious to ask you if you've had any great success with formats and anything you're testing in that realm.
Yeah, absolutely. I've learned immediately that, you know, if you read something and your heart like sinks, whether that be from it resonating from like a sadness perspective, or I can relate, or, you know, where you can really grab someone by the heartstrings. Like me personally, when you know, a lot of people are animal lovers. And so the other day I posted something about dogs. Obviously, I had no plan on it going viral, but it's just, it continues to build those things. But honestly, things that are controversial, unfortunately, and money, you know, no matter how patriotic someone is, they have to be able to sustain and provide current lifestyle, whether it's private school, having a large family, all the things. And so I've noticed whenever you talk about money or, you know, things like being worldwide deployable or the expeditionary medicine type of, just like showing physically like them out there doing it with either still pictures or videos, on the backside with the impressions and members reached is huge, is a very large number, even if there's not maximum interaction, which is then what drives my messages like, hey, I saw you posted X, Y, and Z. Can you explain like what that would look like, or how could I get to there if I'm a general surgeon, type of deal. You know, as everyone says, the lurkers are the ones that, you know, engage with you like on a professional level, not like on a platform level. And so I love lurkers. Like when I have a solid post that has decent interaction, but not the level I wanted to, I'm even more excited because I know that my DMs or my email is about to blow up. That's like the signal that I recognize, like, okay, this is about to be really good for me, like on a professional and a platform level.
That's what Peter Walker said on one of our first episodes. It's that the metric he tracks is actually DMs, not comments or likes. Because if you're a physician or if you're a Fortune 500 CEO, you're probably not going to comment on your post, Michael, or you're not going to comment on Peter's post. But you might send him a DM after and say, I love that post. I have some questions for you about this role. Or in Peter's case, it's like, I have questions about Carta. And it's so validating to hear that, because I think a lot of people get caught up with impressions a lot and comments at the start, when that's not always the goal for a lot of these bigger outcomes.
Exactly. And even like to add on to that, when I'm leading my team for the exact same concept, I'm telling them, hey, make sure all modes of prospecting or all modes of communication where you can be reached is within reach, not on the post, of course, but like whether it's a job description or, we're gonna try out that and more thing and see what happens with it. Removing the and more and making it very specific. But because sometimes I don't, like you said, I don't get a DM, I'll get a text, I'll get a call, I'll get a voicemail, I'll get an email, but it all originates from LinkedIn.
In your role right now, how much time are you spending on LinkedIn versus sending emails or doing other campaigns or talking to physicians to try to recruit them? Or how much time leading your team too?
You know, if anyone in the clinical psychology or the psychiatry world hears this portion, they might hit me up and ask if they want to provide some help. An unhealthy amount of time. But what's unhealthy mean? It's subjective. I'd probably spend 6 hours a day, Monday through Friday, and maybe half of that on the weekends. And that's not me like dialed in directly, into LinkedIn. That's like, I've got my monitors up, and one has got one thing and the other one's got another thing, and there's different windows up, and I don't want to bore you with the details, but I have physically where I am like, oh, a ping, oh, a DM, oh, hey, I just saw somebody on the team post something that we need to fix that real quick before like the wrong message gets out, or hey man, you need to refine that and put the human back into it because it looks like Chad GPT literally just dumped it from his database, and it's gonna be poorly seen upon from from our perspective. So an unhealthy amount of time.
Me too, honestly. So nothing wrong with that. Given all the success you've had with LinkedIn, have you started to get some of your employees and other people in the Navy to try to post on LinkedIn, whether they're in recruitment or not?
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's funny. It started off with like just the people that I know, to helping them, getting them right. People that were getting out of the Navy. Not that I had any experience with transition. I'm not saying I'm a coach. Just hey, at least get your stuff right, and then go talk to someone who knows how to help transition. But it went from that to now teaching. Like there's a recruiting class that all of our recruiters go to. That's 5 weeks long, in Pensacola, Florida, and now I teach a 3-hour class once a month to all of them, and how to get the sheer ID verification, how to get LinkedIn Premium for free for 12 months. My system on how it works, like the very in detail, like start to finish, do this, do that. You know, gosh, the LinkedIn Premium search now feature where you don't have to like click filters. You can just say, hey, find me Daniel Greenberg in Australia. I want to know how many, and it'll list you how many Daniel Greenbergs. The new feature is incredible. If you haven't messed with it yet. But yeah, it's kind of ventured off to my team, peers, people getting out of the Navy, to the recruiting class. And honestly, like if I had enough time, I would probably do like a pro bono, like nonprofit kind of deal for any military, any veteran, any spouse, to show them how to like optimize, how to use it for job hunting. If they're in a recruiter or sales role, how to use it for social selling. Just like, out of the kindness of my heart. So, and then maybe monetize it at some point. But yeah.
When you're going to these trainings, what are some of the common pitfalls and mistakes you see that these beginning recruiters or service members are making?
The biggest thing is fear, embarrassment, all those things. Not even be able to like take the first step forward. Just beginning with a post, or, with the day of, with how technology is for us now. I don't want to say laziness, but more of like, hey, show me, show me, show me, instead of, well, hey, I just, gave you the keys to the castle. Just go play with it. Go walk around the castle, open some doors. Okay, cool. There's a scary monster behind now, and they'll do that ever again. And just kind of like work through the flows of what works for because what I do won't work for everybody, and vice versa, for you and your audience. But there's some things that are universal, right? That are good practices that will work for everybody. And I would say really mastering your niche. If you're a general officer recruiter, which is kind of like for us, anyone from like nukes or regular stuff, stay within that niche, make sure it's, again, legitimate content, not calling all lawyers. The Navy has black, blah, 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 just really goofy stuff. And so staying true to your niche, making sure it's, if I talk to Daniel Greenberg in person, it kind of matches the content and the voice. And like, it's not like two different people, like, hey, like you're getting catfished almost. Like, this is not this guy's voice. Like, this guy is a fraud kind of deal.
That point you made about fear of failure is something that Matt and I overcame, and I'm sure it's probably even scarier in something like the Navy or the military because, well, honestly, I have no clue, but anyone trying to start out posting content has this fear of climbing cringe mountain because your posts aren't gonna do well at the start. That's just Mr. Beast started at 0. Everyone starts at 0 followers. No one just magically starts at 100,000. So I'm curious to ask how you help these service members get over the cringe of failure because I'm sure they're like scared really. I mean, it's an irrational fear. We can't even put it in words sometimes what we're scared of, but I'm just curious to hear how you help people go through that.
Honestly, what I do is I put myself out there all the way. I walk into the room butt naked, not literally, for the people listening and watching, but I tell them like, hey, look, me right now as I'm teaching you guys, I know that some things I say are going to come across to you guys as cringe, and I have the same fear when I make a post. I have the same fear from day one, except I don't care anymore because I know that my intent is good. And I know that like what I want to share is great knowledge, and it's not for everybody, right? That's that's the point of the whole niche thing. And so then I said that it's never going to go away. It's just like when we talk to our supervisor or our boss, or you're having an interview with someone for the first time, there's that natural fear there. And fear is good, right? Fear means you care, in my opinion. And so like it just depends on how you let fear take over, if you let it take over, or if it's just like, oh, hey, what's up, fear? Okay, cool. Let's do this kind of deal. But I kind of show them my original posts back from like 22 or 23, whenever I actually started getting more like consistent with it. I'm like, hey, calling all bloody blah, copy and paste from the LLMs. And again, just I think really showing them like with me being on the screen and 30 of them watching and listening and all the things, just letting them know like, hey, me too. We're gonna do it together. And they're like, oh, okay, got this, this guy is not standing behind the ivory tower saying like thou shall and he's better. Just like, yeah, man, that's it's going to happen. It's called being a human, right? Let it happen.
I love that. You approach these conversations just like you approach your content on LinkedIn. You're not trying to act like someone you are, and you're just like you're having a normal conversation with me right now. You're not through any sort of filter or anything.
No, man, I'm a goofball. I tell people like I don't have the magic number, but if you held a gun to my head, I'm like 70% professional, 20% personal, and 10% memes because I love memes. The memes are important. So that's just me.
The snow meme you had yesterday was hilarious. We're recording this at the time of the major snowstorm in the Northeast and in actually parts of Kentucky and I think like Nashville in the South too. So I hope you're staying warm right now and it hasn't hit you too hard in Nashville.
No, we've got some embarrassing looking ice that makes driving difficult, but not enough snow where the kids can go have fun. So
Ugh. When thinking about that line of being authentic and sounding like AI, something that a lot of executives fear that listen to this is thinking that they're going to post something that is going to get them in trouble. And I'm sure a lot of people that you coach may think this too, that because not a lot of people post on LinkedIn, they may get in trouble for saying something they shouldn't in the hopes of being authentic. I'm curious how you help people through that and how you navigate both being authentic and also not trying to toe that line between saying something that might put the Navy in a bad light.
right. So I'll say what and again, I've never been on the civilian side, coaching C-suite folks, but I'll say if I was, I would say, hey, if this was you, right, and you were reading this and it was about C-suite Bob at insert here company or parallel C-suite guy down the hall, how would it make you feel? And obviously there's no such thing as perfect, but would it resonate in a way that you would either understand, or does it toe the line where it's like professional, but also like, hey, we're all humans. Like, you know, the CEO of LinkedIn, I'm sure drinks bourbon or has a beer or whatever. I'm sure he's got something that, half the country would say, oh my God, and cancel you on, right? That's just, again, freedom of speech is the beautiful thing of being a United States American citizen. And, the freedom that this country, provides and allows. And so there's no easy answer, but on my side, I always say like, hey, if the admiral, right, my 2-star admiral that owns my entire enterprise reports directly to the chief of personnel, directly to the secretary of the Navy and to the president, if he was sitting next to me reading this, yeah, it would probably be super awkward for me, but I would take it like a champ. It's like, would he like think entirely, and he's on LinkedIn, by the way, he interacts with me. Super cool. Very cool to see, the tip of the spear in your enterprise interacting and posting on LinkedIn. But, I always think like if that guy was sitting next to me or read my post directly, what would he think? And I would say 99% of the time he'd be like, oh, this is great. And again, that 1% of the time when there's the disagreement, so let's agree to disagree, because that's what makes me human. And as long as it's not putting my company where I can get sued, which, you can do all the right things and still get sued. So it's like, unless it's like, I'd say unless it's a hot button topic, race, religion, sex, politics, all the things, don't post, don't even mess with that topic, and instantly delete and block and unfollow anyone that does. But yeah, that's a great question. That's a tough one.
Matt and I were just talking about it in an episode we filmed yesterday, and Matt gave the example of the Wall Street Journal test, which is just like what you described. If this was on the front page of the Wall Street Journal and your mom, your brother, your family, your boss saw it, would you feel comfortable? And if the answer is no, probably don't post that, or think it over, maybe tweak it a little bit and then post it again. But that is, it's a hard part of posting content, to find that middle ground. And the reality is, when you're posting, call it 1,000 times a year between your comments and your profile and everything, one probably will rub someone the wrong way. And that's also just part of being human and making mistakes.
Right. Plot twist. Ready? I saw the other day where you're like, man, someone came on the other day and just kind of like took over. I'm not going to even attempt to do that, but I've got a question for you. Tell me and tell the audience, what's one thing we don't know about you, whether it's a personal or professional thing. And you can't be cookie cutter and short. We need something decent, some value, something that we don't know.
Something about LinkedIn, or about like
or just
my
maybe your
life.
journey. Yeah, just your journey, whether it could be about, connection accepted, or even just your professional journey and where you're at currently, and, where you're looking to go. I'm personally curious because, I'll say I love you like as a person, and kind of like what you said, your posting and your recommendations match your energy, your voice, and your tone. And so like, I'm genuinely interested to follow you and watch you guys hit that $10 million podcast. And I'm excited for you guys.
Well, thank you so much, Michael. And I don't normally get many questions like that on the show. I'm trying to think of something. Matt and I actually just did a solo episode where Matt interviewed me. And one of the stories that I sometimes feel pretty uncomfortable talking about, because at the first I was pretty embarrassed by it. And I also don't want to make it seem like I'm using this story just for like clout and trying to go viral in a way. And what that story is my freshman year of college, someone fired 6 shots directly at my dad. My dad's fortunately all safe. They all missed. I still don't know how to this day, but one came so close that he had a hole in the back of his sweater. And that story and like occurrence has really made me, well, one, motivated. For context, he was running for mayor and didn't stop. He continued to run for mayor and then ended up winning. And to do that has kept me motivated. Like, if he's going to keep going through that, what's my excuse? And then also, I felt very thankful for every day and just started to appreciate more of the small things in life that I may have taken for granted, like being able to just scroll on LinkedIn for an hour, or being able to run when I want to. 6 days a week. So that's one story, maybe a little bit more emotional than you were expecting, but that some of the audience may not know about.
No, that's awesome. Well, sharing with me was awesome. Thank you. I didn't mean like, obviously, you know what I'm trying to say. I didn't mean that
Yeah.
what had happened was awesome, but no, it's, again, I think that provides just equal, if not more value to share like trials, tribulations, the why behind the things that you're doing. And people will buy in from that and not anything to do with your business model. Cause they're like, hey, this guy right here is going to do all the things. He is going to go through a brick wall for me. I can trust him or her or whatever. And so I love it. Thank you.
One more thing that I'm kind of obsessed with that I've been writing a lot about right now. I write my posts like 2 weeks out because I schedule so much. I don't know if you schedule at all, but it's the concept of, I don't know if you do this in the Navy at all, but if you're like in investment banking, for example, you might take a client out to dinner. Do you do that in the Navy? Like take a physician out to dinner?
No, in that exact regard, but we'll do a lunch for residents. Like we'll go to a teaching hospital and provide lunch and stuff. But no, we're not doing like executive taken to the baseball game. Like I get what you're saying.
The thought is for the SpaceX IPO that's probably going to happen, Goldman Sachs really wants that. Goldman Sachs may take Yalon and his C-suite to this $10,000 Michelin star restaurant to try to get them. Or you may do a lunch for some physicians to try to reel them in. And what I think is that content is this new client dinner because you're just building a relationship with someone at scale. Because just like someone may want to have a positive experience after they go to dinner, they're also going to have a positive experience viewing your content. And I think it's proven to work for you so far. You haven't needed to do these extravagant dinners. You haven't needed to pay people crazy salaries. And you can just tell stories and bring out emotion in people that makes them want to serve their country in a way that people haven't before you. So I think you're proof of this, that LinkedIn is the new client dinner.
You're not wrong. It's like, what's the co-founder of Netflix? I forget his name. He's big on LinkedIn.
Reed Hastings? Oh, Mark Randolph.
Mark Randolph. I saw you said that, and it was sitting in the back of my head that I was like, please don't forget when he's done speaking. He literally posted yesterday, and I interacted with him. He's like, what did he say? He's like, my team and I are watching. We are watching who comments in our posts. We are watching so that way, if your name comes through my avenue for, applying for whatever, maybe we'll recognize you. Or and like basically he said what you said in a different concept or context rather. And it's so true. I mean, like, the CEO of LinkedIn, whatever he posts, he's very interactive. I'm always on there and he'll like or respond to it. And it's like, where else can I get in the room with the CEO of LinkedIn or, anyway, it's just, I love LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn. When Connection accepted t-shirts or even better, nice golf polo. So when I go have something fancy to play with, or I even rock like a nice trucker hat, man, I would totally support you guys because I love what you're doing. And I can't wait to see how fast you guys get to that $10 million podcast because this is so real and it's different. It's different.
Well, I appreciate it a lot, Michael. And a previous guest, Will Bauman, has actually hooked us up with a website on Fourth Wall for his merch. So I'm going to send you some stuff. I don't think we've done trucker hats yet, but we've tried a few polos and hoodies, and I'll send you some of those.
Heck yeah.
Is there anything we didn't touch on about LinkedIn that you wanted to cover?
Oh man, I'm sure that there's probably 1,000 things that the second we both hang up, it'll just be like, bing.
What about newsletters? Have you thought about writing a newsletter?
Yes. I'm trying to think of the gal's name yesterday. Anyway, she was posting about Substack. And I was like, man, I really need to do it because like the long form content I put out is like, I put my heart and soul into it, like hours. And like, for example, I did a really deep piece for like LinkedIn Premium and like start to finish with screenshots and the why and how, and if you have problems, and it had very, very minimal interaction. And I was like, I wonder if it's just because it's in between like a newsletter and a post, and long form is great to have like the differences, when you go to someone's profile, like images, video, articles, etc. But I'm wondering if I need to switch that to either a newsletter format or perhaps a Substack. But I want to keep it on the platform. And so, these are the things that like I'm internalizing daily, like that I need to take action on. And maybe we could talk offline. Before we can talk about it here.
It's tough. And your job is also not to be a content creator, but it is, but it isn't. So it's like kind of difficult because if you wanted to maximize reach and maximize what you were putting out, maybe we'd start a YouTube channel for you, just like what we did for Connection Accepted, because you have some really cool access to things that a lot of us don't know anything about. Like, I doubt any of our audience knew about the difference between tracks of in the Navy, of enlisted versus officer, and doubt people even knew that there's a training in Pensacola, Florida, where all the recruiters get trained. And a lot of people, some of them probably didn't even know that, you're bringing the Navy to LinkedIn. So you have a really unique perspective and are in cool rooms. And I think the Netflix documentary about the U.S. military, I think that's proof that there's demand for a lot of this stuff. And whether it's Substack, LinkedIn, Instagram, I think what'll work the best for you is something you can do long term. And right now, LinkedIn is working so well. I would not stop it. And if Substack and YouTube are going to be too hard, I would be careful, because you don't want to burn yourself out too much, because you have such great momentum going on LinkedIn right now.
And I've got like a whole nother Apple Notes running tab on I was thinking about starting a YouTube channel, but I just like, who would run it with me? We don't have a budget for, this is all out of the kindness of my heart, everything that we were doing. And so I don't have a budget. I don't have a team. I've got the brain, the know-how and the tact and all the things, but we've been thinking about doing like the Navy unscripted, medicine unscripted, Connection Accepted, military detachment. Maybe, I'm just saying, I wouldn't ask for any money, but no, I'm just teasing it. Unless you'd be, interested in having like a military segment, I would love that. But yeah, it's tough. Like, or maybe it's not. Maybe I just got to take the jump, right, and kind of build it as we're flying, like we do most things.
The only real way to find out is just to post. And the fact that you can juggle your job, recruiting physicians, serving the country, and post on LinkedIn, and comment on people's posts, and train other people in the Navy how to post on LinkedIn. Now you're thinking about adding a YouTube on top of it. Like, I'm beyond impressed, Michael.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. It's not much, but it's honest, right? So
those were all the questions we had. Is there anything else you want to hit on or leave the audience with before we wrap?
yeah, I'll say, if the military is not for everybody. That's obvious to say, and if not, I just said it. But I would argue, look into it. Ask a question. Talk to a recruiter. Whether you are a 17-year-old and you're going to high school, we have awesome programs that like can get you qualified to be a nuclear engineer. And whether you're like in your 30s or 40s, and maybe you are at the ceiling of your income and you're prepared for retirement and you want to give back before you can't. I would say look into it. It's not for everybody. 1% of the population even qualifies, and propensity to serve these days is at an all-time low. And hopefully I can be, a needle in the haystack to change that. But I would just, whether it's the Air Force, the Army, the Coast Guard, the Navy, federal service, at the VA, just look into it, do some Googling and just educate yourself. And, you might learn something, or find something that's like, wow, I had no clue that I can make $400,000 a year as an oral surgeon and still serve my country. Like, these are things that, anyway, so just look into it. You never know. Maybe you'll learn more and, and share with a friend.
And definitely give Michael a follow on LinkedIn as well if you want some of the more authentic content of what it's like to be in the Navy, not just the Google answer. Thanks for your service, Michael, and thank you again for coming on.
Appreciate you, man. Thank you for having me. And maybe next time we get Matt on here.
Absolutely.